I think it's safe to say that the 2024 season did not end the way that the Atlanta Falcons hoped it would. They blew a 28-13 lead in the second half, on the way to losing 34-28 in overtime to the 7th seed Chicago Bears. So now it's back to the drawing board for the former Super Bowl champions, and there's a good chance that this roster could look drastically different heading into 2025. First, we'll look at the stats as Desmond Ridder threw 30 touchdowns and 23 interceptions and just over 4,600 passing yards. 23 interceptions is still way too high, but it wasn't helped out by the fact that the O-line wasn't very good this year. Ronald Jones rushed for over 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns this year, but he just wasn't as impressive in this season as he was in 2023 when he rushed for almost 1,500 yards. But he did have a lot more receptions, having 74 on the season for 663 yards and just 1 touchdown. Desmond Ridder ran for 599 yards and 6 touchdowns on 123 carries, but also fumbled the ball a league-high 17 times. Tyler Algier had 99 yards and 6 touchdowns on 39 carries. He didn't put up a whole lot of yards, but he did what he could when he got his opportunities. Speaking of opportunities, I was hoping that James Cook would get more than 11 carries on 45 yards, but hopefully he'll be implemented a little bit more if he comes back next year. Kyle Pitts had a team-high 1,094 yards and 8 touchdowns on 55 receptions, and now the Falcons have to figure out a way to bring him back. Drake London had 925 yards and a team-high 9 touchdowns on 59 receptions after missing 2 games this year. Bryan Edwards had 734 yards and 3 touchdowns on 55 receptions, and Calvin Ridley had a really disappointing season with 711 yards, 5 touchdowns on 40 receptions. Ridley really hasn't been the same since coming back from his suspension in 2022, and now there are major questions on what the Falcons should do in this situation. The offensive line was putrid as Craig Bennett gave up 19 sacks after just giving up 9 last year, and first-round pick DeMarcus Holiday gave up 12 on the left side. Tyler Biadasz gave up 11 sacks after not giving up a single one last year in Dallas. Chris Lindstrom gave up 6 after giving up 6 last year after not giving up a single one in 2022. And Bryson Hankins in 14 games gave up 5 sacks. Derwin James had a team-high 120 tackles to lead the team. Deion Jones was second with 116. Troy Anderson had 107 and finished third. Arnold Ebiketie had the most tackles for a loss with 26. Jones had 21 and Anderson had 19. Ebiketie had yet another strong season for the Falcons with 18.5 sacks, but Jeffrey Simmons in his first year in Atlanta had 7.5, and he's really coming to his own after coming over from Tennessee last season. Grady Jarrett only had 1.5, which is really notable. It's his lowest total since his rookie year. Ignore the 2021 stats, that's just a Madden glitch. Ooh, surprise, surprise. But Jarrett might be on his way out after this season. We'll talk more about that later. And Lorenzo Carter only had 1.5 after having such a great 2022 campaign, and he's been a real disappointment so far in the past 2 seasons. Alani Glenn ended up having 3 sacks this year and 11 tackles for a loss, so he's doing a pretty good job on the interior, and hopefully that continues into 2025. AJ Terrell had a league-high 9 interceptions, Rashad Fenton had 7, Trayvon Diggs had 4, which is a little disappointing. Derwin James had 3, Jeff Okudah had 3, Deion Jones and Richie Green had 2, and then Troy Anderson, Dane Cruikshank, and Brian Orchard each had 1. Derwin James has been solid for the Falcons for the past 2 seasons, although he did go down in interceptions this year, but overall he's been absolutely solid for this Falcons defense and has been a real leader over the past 2 seasons. Younghoe Koo missed 4 field goals this year, which is a bit of a drop-off from the last 2 seasons, but he's still a great kicker, and I'm still definitely going to keep him around, even though he missed a crucial one last year. Jake Brady punted the ball a lot more this year than he had last year. 35 punts in 2023, but then 52 this year. And he improved his average and his net punting average as well. And the return stats are pretty unremarkable, as Brian Orchard just never really got going as a return man, and even missed 2 games, and even without him, it was about the same. Joe Burrow ended up leading the league in passing yards with 5,226. Josh Allen and Dak Prescott were the only other 2 who had over 5,000 yards passing. Patrick Mahomes threw for 42 touchdowns to lead the league. Dak, Josh Allen, and Howie Reagan were the other two to have over 40 touchdowns, or 40 or more, I should say. Desmond Ridder had 23 interceptions to lead the league. Clayton Anderson was the only other quarterback to throw over 20, as he threw 22. Derrick Henry was just 19 yards away from yet another 2,000-yard rushing season, but he did end up winning the rushing title. Alvin Kamara led the league with 29 touchdowns, which is a new NFL record. Cooper Kupp once again led the league in receiving yards with 1,477, and he also had 14 touchdowns as well. It was Elijah Moore, however, who ended up leading the league in receptions with 112. But the big story here is Kendrick Bourne, who led the league with 19 touchdown receptions, 5 more than Kupp and Russell Gage, who were second on the list. It's really an Eastern Washington takeover at this point, as Bourne has his first 1,000-yard season, and his first season with double digits in touchdowns. Craig Bennett ends up leading the league with 19 interceptions, no surprise there. Levante David ends up leading the league with 151 tackles. Arnold Ebiketie actually led the league in tackles for a loss, but it shows Cameron Jordan, because reasons, I guess. Nick Bosa ends up tying Michael Strahan and TJ Watt for the most sacks in a season with 22.5. AJ Terrell led the league with 9 interceptions, but of course it shows Tyrann Mathieu because, again, reasons. Jose Linsley and Devin White lead the league with 11 deflections, although Trayvon Diggs had way more than that, but again, reasons. Derwin James once again leads the league in forced fumbles with 9, the same amount he had last year. And Deion Jones leads the league with 7 fumble recoveries. Younghoe Koo goes 26 of 30 to lead the league with both field goals made and attempted. And then Jaguars punter Logan Cook leads the league with a 55.2 average per punt and 51.7 net average. So now looking at the annual awards, and Josh Allen wins MVP, which isn't really too much of a surprise if we're being completely honest. It's always usually like him or Mahomes or Burrow, one of those guys. And then Arthur Smith actually wins Coach of the Year, which is really surprising to me. I thought Dable would probably be up there, but he was second at least. So now looking at the NFC awards, Alvin Kamara wins Offensive Player of the Year. We didn't have anybody place. Nick Bosa wins Defensive Player of the Year, no surprise there. Arnold Ebiketie did finish third, however, and Deion Jones was 10th. But Bosa definitely deserved it for tying the record in sacks. Elijah Bass ends up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, although Robbie Dahl was second, so I know Bear has to be happy about that. Zakai Harris and Shrugs Hannon were up there as well. Jaron Friedman wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. We didn't have anybody placed because we didn't really have any rookies playing. Howie Reagan wins Best QB. Desmond Ridder doesn't even place. Alvin Kamara wins Best Running Back with Ronald Jones finishing 7th. Kendrick Bourne wins Best Receiver, no surprise there. Zach Martin wins Best Offensive Lineman. Jake Matthews actually plays, even though he didn't play a whole lot for us. Nick Bosa wins Best D-Lineman. We didn't have anybody get there. Arnold Ebiketie does win Best Linebacker, so I'm happy about that. Deion Jones was there as well. AJ Terrell wins Best DB. Derwin James finishes 5th. Rashad Fenton finishes 3rd. And then Trayvon Diggs finishes 10th. And then Rodrigo Blankenship wins Best Kicker. Younghoe Koo still made the Pro Bowl, but he finishes 7th. Joe Mixon wins Offensive Player of the Year in the AFC. Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year. Patrick Kendrick wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. Mark Falla did finish 6th, however, so he was up there. Percy Percival wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. So Bear is really just like shutting it down with both of his players here. Josh Allen wins Best Quarterback, big surprise there. Joe Mixon wins Best Running Back, again, no surprise. Elijah Moore wins Best Receiver. Creed Humphrey wins Best Offensive Lineman. Best Defensive Lineman goes to Myles Garrett. Max Crosby wins Best Linebacker. Jose Linsley wins Best Defensive Back. And last but not least, Daniel Carlson wins Best Kicker. So now we look at the records that were set this year. Alvin Kamara set the single season record for most rushing touchdowns in a year with 29. Kendrick Bourne now has the 4th most receiving touchdowns in a season with 19, behind Cooper Kupp, Jerry Rice, and Randy Moss. Pretty good company to be in, if you ask me. And then, of course, we have Nick Bosa, who tied the record. Obviously, it doesn't say that he tied the record with 2 guys, but he tied it with 2 guys. And so now we're going to take a look at what the Falcons are looking at as far as contracts go heading into the offseason. And there are some notable names that may not be Falcons heading into the next season. I'm not quite sure that I want to pay Mitchell Trubisky $3.5 million next year to be the backup, especially knowing that we have to pay Desmond Ridder big money after that season, as he is now heading into his contract year, and after winning a Super Bowl in his second year, I don't see why I wouldn't re-sign him, but he does have to cut back on the turnovers though. James Cook might be somebody I bring back. I didn't get a lot of usage out of him just because I didn't really set my packages correctly, but he might be somebody I bring back. Tyler Algier is heading into a contract season, but he hasn't really produced all that much outside of being a goal line back, and I don't think I'm going to pay him all that much money. Ronald Jones is also heading into a contract season, and honestly, if he has another regression, I'll probably just let him go, because I don't really see him developing too much more anyways. At receiver, we have DeJarvis Johnsonberg, who didn't play a ton last season, but I'll probably bring him back on a one-year deal and see what he can do in the preseason. Now we have to have a conversation about Drake London, though, who's also heading into a contract year. Do we bring him back? Do we let him go? Do we trade him like the Titans did A.J. Brown? Who knows? Bryan Edwards is pretty good as a number 3 option, but I'm not so sure it was the best decision to bring him back. But we're stuck with him for 3 more years, so I just have to cope. And as far as Calvin Ridley goes, it might be time to trade him in the offseason because he just hasn't been productive the past 2 years. As far as tight end goes, we have a huge decision to make. And it's really not even a decision. I mean, it's already decided. Kyle Pitts is going to come back as an Atlanta Falcon in 2025. Now, it's just a matter of whether or not we're able to re-sign him or if we have to put a franchise tag on him. One way or another, Kyle Pitts is going to be on this team next year, though. At left tackle, I'm really going to try my hardest to trade Jake Matthews next year, but I don't think anybody even wants his contract at this point, so I might just end up cutting my losses with him. And DeMarcus Holiday has to play a lot better if he's going to stick at left tackle, because good lord, he was putrid, to say the very least. At left guard, Bryson Hankins actually played a little bit better this year, but he's still not great. And Jalen Mayfield is now going to be a free agent, so we're probably not going to bring him back. Tyler Biadasz has to have a much better season if he wants to get a second contract with us, because he didn't play very well at all, and I really miss Matt Hennessy at this point. Chris Lindstrom remains our best offensive lineman, and even then, he's not all that great in pass protection as he showed a lot of times this year, but hopefully he bounces back next season. Craig Bennett has 2 more years on his contract, but if he wants to stick around, he can't give up 19 sacks. I'm almost assured to bring Jeffrey Simmons back on a second contract, but he does have 2 years left on his current deal. And after how underwhelming he was this season, I think we've seen the last of Grady Jarrett as a starter at right end, so I'm probably just going to let him go or try to trade him. Alani Glenn has 2 years left on his contract after this season, so I definitely want to bring him back, but we'll see how he performs over the next 2 seasons before we make a decision on that. And then going to linebacker, Arnold Ebiketie is heading into a contract year, but I'm definitely bringing him back. And I'll probably bring back Glenn Mallard as well, just because he played pretty well in a pinch for us. At middle linebacker, Deion Jones is still playing at a high level, even at 29. But I still don't think that it's an absolute layup that Troy Anderson gets another contract after this year. He's been pretty up and down for the most part, but if he has a big season in 2025, I'll definitely bring him back on a long-term deal. Monty Rice might be somebody I bring back on a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal to possibly challenge Anderson. Bill Johnson's a superstar dev, so I'm probably going to bring him back for a 1-year deal, but if he doesn't play well in the preseason, he's probably gone. At right outside linebacker, Lorenzo Carter is probably going to be done. He really has disappointed over the past 2 seasons after having such a great year in 2022. So that means D'Angelo Moore might actually get a shot as the starter at right outside linebacker. I don't know if I'll sign somebody or draft somebody, but he'll definitely have an opportunity to contend for the starting job. At cornerback, we're pretty set with A.J. Terrell, Trayvon Diggs, and Rashad Fenton. I'm hoping Diggs has a better season than he did this past year, but we'll just have to see. Richie Grant is also somebody whose contract expires after this season. I'd like to bring him back as well, but I don't think I'm going to give an arm and a leg to bring him back. I might re-sign Dane Cruikshank and put him at free safety if I can't bring back Grant, but no guarantees that he even starts there either. Younghoe Koo has 2 more years on his contract, and we'll address that when it comes time. But even though he had an off season, I still feel confident in him as a kicker. And Jake Bailey still has 2 more years on his contract, and I think that he's totally fine as our punter. So we're actually going to address the draft for once. We haven't really done that in this series so far, but here we are. We have a pick in each round, with our 7th round pick being the Bengals pick. And in the last mock draft, we were mocked to pick up Robert Henley out of South Carolina to potentially be a replacement for Grady Jarrett. Looking at Henley's key ratings, his block shedding's a B and his tackling is an A, with his power moves being a C. But the big problem here for me is his finesse moves being an F. His strength looks like it's going to more than make up for that, however. But he's projected to go in the 1st or 2nd round, but his talent is really 2nd or 3rd. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, to be completely honest. And his awareness is a B, his block shedding is a B, and he actually has A impact blocking, which is pretty interesting. Another guy I'm looking at in the 1st round is Devontae Overeem, another right end out of Alabama, who has A block shedding, B power moves, and A tackling. The problem with Overeem is that he's being mocked to go earlier than our pick is supposed to go. Same with Henley as well. But overall, if he's available or if I can trade up for him, I absolutely will. His block shedding being an A and his play rec being an A as well just really has me hyped about him. And we could definitely use a replacement for Jarrett at this point. Someone else I'm looking at is defensive tackle Matthew CARSON out of Ole Miss. He looks to be more of a 3-4 defensive end at 291. And his strength is solid to good. He has great to elite jumping, and his speed's pretty good as well. He's somebody who's definitely on the board for me. I mean, his block shedding, play rec, and power moves are all B's, as well as his finesse moves and awareness. So I think he's pretty much the most balanced defensive lineman that we could potentially get in the 1st round. Taylor Cherry out of Notre Dame is another defensive end that I'm looking at. And he's a guy who has B block shedding and B power moves as well. But again, his finesse moves aren't great, but maybe that doesn't matter too much as a defensive lineman. He's another guy who has really good strength. We're just going to have to see how he does in the combine before we really judge whether or not we're able to pick him up. I mean, his play recognition's at an A. His pursuit won't be worse than a B. So this is definitely another guy that we should probably keep tabs on as far as replacements for Jarrett. We also are looking at Lance MAGEE, another Notre Dame end, this time a left end for the Fighting Irish. And he's another 1st to 2nd round guy, so maybe we could even trade up for him as well. And he's another guy who has great to elite strength, so really, it looks like a really strong draft when it comes to the defensive linemen as a whole. I really don't think that we can go wrong with any of these guys. But again, the D finesse moves and even the C awareness kind of turned me off to him, but he has A play recognition, so we'll just have to see. But we're also potentially looking at middle linebackers as well, just in case Troy Anderson doesn't work out for us. And one guy that really caught my eye was Anthony Brown, who's actually a top fit for us and a perfect fit. He is 6'1", 229 out of UCF. Now, he has really good zone coverage at A, but the problem is his strength isn't very good. He's poor to marginal as far as strength goes, but he has good to great acceleration, great to elite agility, good to great speed, and again, he has A zone coverage and he has A awareness as well. 2 very important pieces of a middle linebacker. I'm just hoping the tackling's good. And last but not least, we're also looking at Cam Lane. Now, I don't think it's too likely that we'll end up drafting him because I honestly think Richie Grant will come back for another contract, but it's good to have your options on the line just in case things don't go your way, either through contract negotiations or through free agency. And Lane looks like he could be a pretty good fit here. He has B play recognition, his awareness could be a little bit better, but he has A tackling. You just really have to see how he turns out to be when it comes to the combine. With that being said, just so you guys know, I'll be streaming the off-season of the Falcons franchise at around 6 p.m. Eastern this Tuesday, which is the 15th. So hopefully I will see you guys there. And we might even play some preseason as well in the stream. But just keep your eyes up, keep your notifications on, and then you guys will most likely see the off-season stream.